Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria. I will be your facilitator tonight. We're going to call this meeting to order now. It is 7 p.m. on December 19, 2022. And this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission Subcommittee and on Officer Accountability. If the Spanish language interpreters, Gaby or Maria, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation, please.
Esta reunión es una cita pública y está sujeta a la ley del estado de Oregon y el municipal de Portland y las reglas administrativas y va a ser grabada. La interpretación en español está disponible para esta cita. Cuando tratando de tener acceso a la interpretación en español, tienen que escoger en Zoom donde dice Language Interpretation. Y ahí va a darte el control para el fondo poder escoger la pantalla y ver que diga en español.
Muchas gracias, Gaby. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Aaron and Christine. Welcome. Thank you very much. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. Finally, the closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning service and is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to the City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature as the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things. If attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and the answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon on the middle of your screen. Now, for the land acknowledgement, I will pass it to our co-chairs. Thank you. Co-chair Charlie, you are on.
Got it.
Thank you.
I didn't put muscle into pressing on the microphone. Okay, so Charlie Michelle Wesley, co-chair of the subcommittee of Officer Accountability. The Police Accountability Commission currently uses the land acknowledgement on display at the City Hall. I have asked my co-chair, Commissioner Dan Handelman, to read the land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you, co-chair. I am Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the commission, and I have kind of filed this disclaimer before that this isn't exactly what I would say if I were writing my own land acknowledgement, but this is what the city has, so we're going to use that today. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Calumet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters.
Thank you, Co-Chair and Commissioner Dan. Now we're gonna remind ourselves about our community agreements. Is the next slide. Thank you. What we will do is we'll go give time for everyone to read these community agreements. I just ask that we reflect on it and read it. And then we will pass. There's 2 pages for these agreements. Please, can we go to the next page? Thank you. Okay, now I can ask everyone, do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and to gently calling in our college and collaborators if needed? And if you can give me your thumbs up or your, okay, do you agree? Thank you very much. Now I will pass it to the facilitators to explain the timeline, to discuss the timeline. No facilitators, I'm sorry, the co-chairs of the subcommittee.
Is this, I'm sorry, Charlie, Michelle Wesley. This is not on my instructions to read. So I'm just going to read what's in front of me. Apologies. This meeting is part of the Police Accountability Commission's powers and duties. That's what I have. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Powers and duties of work. It is expected to go into January and will end when all 3 of the phases outcome documents are approved. This is the first of several phases in which the Police Accountability Commission will directly begin deciding what will go into the recommendations the PAC will send to City Council for a new police accountability system, including the new oversight board. This phase focuses on the functions of the new system. Future phases of work will develop the form of the new system, as well as how it relates to the rest of the city government and the transition plan from our current system to the new one. The commission will present all proposed changes to the City Council in 2023 for their consideration and approval.
Thank you. We can go to the slide 8.
Okay. This slide shows the outcome documents for the powers and duties phase based on the agenda and scope approved by the commission. These documents each correspond to one of the subcommittees. One document will focus on how the new system will access needed information to do its work. The second on how it will handle administrative misconduct allegations against individual officers. And the third on how it will contribute to the structural oversight of the police bureau.
Thank you. Now we go to next slide, please.
This slide is the current project plan for the powers and duties phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It will be updated as needed throughout the phase of work. The slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members.
Thank you.
Oops, a little bit more. Sorry.
Go ahead.
As to the functions of the new system, today's meeting is part of the gold box with the red border. Oh, no, it's a green box. With the red border near the bottom of the screen.
Thank you. You're doing great. Now.
All right. Following today, here are the next few meetings of the Police Accountability Commission. The Subcommittee on Access to Information will meet on December 29th. The Subcommittee on Structural Oversight will meet next in the second week of January. The subcommittee will also have its next meeting. This subcommittee will also have its next meeting in early January. And as you can see, this is tentative on the chart there. The full commission will meet next the third week of January. And the commission is planning a community listening session and Q&A for January 10th. Next slide. Okay. This is another way of displaying the same information on the last slide as the last slide. We're trying out different ways to visually display the information. Give you a second to take a look. Okay. Next slide. Yes. The review of today's meeting, I'm going to turn over to co-chair Dan Handelman.
Thank you. So today's meeting includes a briefing with the Independent Police Review. We have a couple of folks here on from the staff, Director Ross Caldwell. We have a member Q&A from the commission, and then finally public comment and Q&A related to that briefing. Then the rest of the meeting will be talking about the officer accountability documents that we have been working on to help us get towards a draft that we're hoping to pass from the subcommittee to the full commission later on in January. And then at the end of the meeting, there's going to be another open public comment period towards the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Co-Chair and Commissioner Dan and Commissioner and Co-Chair Charlie. Now we're gonna pass to our next item on the agenda. That's the briefing with Independent Police Review and a presentation from Director Ross Caldwell and also Eric Berry. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have them here again. Thank you. And you can start anytime.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. And Eric is here with me. He's our investigations coordinator. So we have 3 questions that we got in advance. So I think we'll just go through that unless somebody wants us to do anything different. But please jump in with any questions, and Eric, maybe I'll take a shot at it and you elaborate or make it make more sense if you would like from there.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. So the first question is, this is regarding City Code section 3.21, 110B. And the question is about, the person said they didn't understand the circumstances that this describes. And there's a quote from that code section, and it says, the director shall not initiate a case where a grievance or other appeal has been filed under a collective bargaining agreement or city personnel rules, or with respect to employees or applicant discrimination complaints. Can you clarify this circumstance? So basically, the section of city code that's being referenced here, and it's 3.21.110B. This is all very complicated and clear as mud, I know, but basically that section of city code is telling us what IPR should look at to open investigations and what it shouldn't look at to open investigations, based on my understanding. And I didn't write this part of the city code. This long predates me being here, but that's my understanding of it. And so it starts off by saying that IPR should basically review lawsuits against the city and notices of tort claims against the city for police misconduct. And so when somebody sues the city and they say that, oh, somebody have a question? I'm sorry.
Right. No, Director Collier, the specific question was about that one section about if somebody's filed a grievance or if there's a discrimination complaint that you're not allowed to investigate. That's the part that we were having trouble understanding. Thank you.
Which is the second sentence of 3.21.110B, right?
I think so.
That's what I was trying to get to. I think you have to read all of letter B together, and it says that IPR will develop procedures for looking at tort claims and complaints where people sue the city, but that we won't look into these other instances where there's been a union grievance or something like that filed against the city. And so this is not anything that we've ever really had to deal with. We do review all tort claim notices against the city for anything that alleges police misconduct. And from there, we reach out to the attorney of the person who filed the tort claim notice to do an interview, and then we would launch the investigation from there. But I think my understanding of this section, and again, this isn't something that has really come up, this is kind of a dusty corner of the city code for our purposes, is it just is limiting what we do look at when we're reviewing investigations. And I think the intent behind it, or at least my guess of what the intent would be, is that something where a union files a grievance or an unfair labor practice or something like that against the city, that's not something that gets investigated as police misconduct. That's something that goes, the union grievance route and is handled in that lane. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question?
Yes, Commissioner Co-Chair Dan, please.
Okay, so I guess what it's trying to do is explain that these things, which are a form of an appeal, are not subject to investigation, but it is possible that they have filed a grievance about an investigation that you already did, and it's possible that you already investigated a discrimination complaint, but that if there's an appeal filed, that doesn't get dealt with the same way as if a civilian was filed the something in court, and then you might have to follow up on that if there's a finding in their favor. Is that what that means?
I'm not sure I'm under. So I think this is just setting parameters for what we do and do not look at. I mean, unions can file grievances on any number of things. There could be an investigation that we conduct that could end up finding a PPB member violated policy, and then they could get disciplined for that, and they could file a grievance about that. So that could be something that this is meant to, this is meant to say that we do not conduct investigations based on that, but it could be any number of other things. I mean, unions can file grievances about a whole bunch of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be something involving the police discipline system. So my reading of this, and again, this is never, other than the fact that we review tort claim notices, this has never come up. We've never had anybody say, hey, you're launching an investigation into something, but there's already a grievance on that. You can't look into it. So it's Eric, you've been here longer than me. Does that, can you think of anything that contradicts that?
No, I think that's generally accurate, Ross. I can't think of a time where the section that we're discussing, the being forbidden to open to a case related to something that's open on a grievance, I can't think of a time where it's ever come into play. I think it primarily relates to kind of internal, who are all unionized, and so they have access to a collective bargaining agreement and kind of a grievance process out.
Yeah, and this I'm sure could be written a lot more clearly, because I'm standing here taking my best shot at what I think it means and what I've always thought it means, but not having it ever come up and had to be tested and had to kind of run through and argue your way through it. It hasn't really been a thing. So yeah, it's a little hard to think of a specific example for something like this that could come up. I mean, I think I could see something where, PPA files a grievance against the city saying officers are being required to do something they don't want to do. And maybe that's not something that should be the subject of an administrative investigation by IPR against the higher ups in the Bureau or something like that. I could see, and this has never come up, but just as an example, if PPA didn't like the mask mandate, for example, during the pandemic, and they wanted to file a grievance against the city or the higher ups in the Bureau and say, hey, you're making us wear masks, we shouldn't have to, or something like that, that would not be something that we would then investigate. But yeah, I don't know. There are things that I'm aware of where we conduct an investigation and then make a recommendation, and then we go to a police review board, and the chief would ultimately find an officer violated policy and discipline the officer, and then they might file a grievance about that. But at that point, the investigation's kind of already been done. So we wouldn't then be investigating again on top of that. I guess it's always possible that new information could come out in that process somehow. I've never seen it. So I'm sorry, I'm not trying to do a bad job of answering this. It's just a weird, it's very strange. It's not very well written. I would think that this is probably something that when they put this in place a long time ago, they were trying to avoid something they foresaw might be a problem, and it maybe just hasn't really been a problem. So that's my best guess. And again, Eric, if you have anything else, please, make me sound smarter.
I'll do my best. No, I think that's about as much speculation as I have. It's just not something I've seen come up. Definitely not related to a community member's complaint anyway, that I can think of.
Yeah. And my reading of that really is because it's in the same section as you will look at tort claim notices against the city. So it seems like a prescriptive, IPR does look into this, doesn't look into this. It just seems like kind of boundary setting to me.
Thank you. Okay, I think we can get to the next question.
Okay, hopefully the next one's easier than the first one. Let's see, number 2, could you please speak to how and why cases are assigned to be investigated by IPR, then reviewed by Internal Affairs, versus investigated by Internal Affairs, then reviewed by IPR? Is there any reason that all cases couldn't be assigned to IPR now and the new oversight agency later without IA conducting investigations themselves? So kind of a couple of parts to that. First off, how cases are assigned to us versus Internal Affairs. So there's a lot of different ways that investigations can come in. The most common one that I think people think of generally would be as a complaint from a community member. So somebody, calls us or emails us or fills out one of our forms in person or online, or comes to our window or something like that and makes a complaint. And then in that instance, we would start the investigation. And then at some point, if it was going to go to a full administrative investigation, either we could keep that investigation or we could send it across the street to Internal Affairs. We try to keep cases that are, maybe potentially like a vulnerable person, like someone dealing with housing issues, or maybe somebody dealing with a mental health crisis or something like that. We try to keep cases like that as much as we can. We would try to keep cases that allege things like racial profiling. Generally, before 2020, we tried to keep protest-related cases but there were so many investigations that came out of 2020 that very, very quickly became impossible. I think we've talked about this before, but it's kind of this weird parallel system where IPR does some investigations, internal affairs does some investigations. And so, we try to kind of carve off what we keep. There's a whole other way that cases can come in, however, which is, if an officer uses force, and then there's the after action review process, where, if an officer uses force, then a sergeant needs to come out and they need to, speak to the person who had force used on them, if that's possible, speak to witnesses, speak to the involved officer, witness officers, then they write up a report that is kind of reviewed up the chain of command. So if somebody up that chain of command in the police bureau sees an issue with the force that was used or the review of the force that was used, that can be sent into internal affairs. So sometimes cases will come in that way and they'll actually get to internal affairs first, and then they let us know what that is about. So I mean, a big, and this kind of goes into the second part of the question, a big deciding factor of if we keep the case or if it goes to internal affairs is what kind of allegations there are. And then the bigger and often driving force behind this is just capacity. How many cases do we have going? How many does internal affairs have going? A lot of times when we get the initial complaint and then we do what we call the intake investigation, which is we have 14 days to do that. A lot of the times we'll get a lot of the kind of more difficult information. And sometimes a lot of the heavy lifting is done in that part. You've identified the officer, hopefully, you've pulled records, you've requested reports and all this kind of stuff. And so a lot of times when we get past that period, all that really remains to be done is interviews of the officers. And so sometimes we'll send that over to internal affairs to do, because they can do that more efficiently than we can. When we schedule officers to be interviewed, we have to go to the internal affairs sergeant and they set it up for us. And so it's a lot, as we talked with another subcommittee about last week, it's a lot of schedule management. And a lot of the people that are being scheduled are in the police bureau. So the police bureau is faster at doing that than we are. For other types of reports, sometimes it's a lot quicker for the police bureau or for internal affairs to do it because they have direct access to all their records, whereas we have to make requests. So if internal affairs got an investigation, about a certain incident, they'd be able to pull police reports probably the same day directly out of the system, where we might be waiting, at times up to 15 days. It just depends on how busy PPB Records is at any given time. And PPB Records has about, I don't know, Eric, like half the people working there that they need working there. And so they're often very, very busy, which keeps us waiting. We talked about this with the access to information subcommittee last week. So it kind of depends, but I would say the biggest driving force is capacity, how many cases we have and how many cases they have, and just what we're able to send over. Eric, do you want to jump in on that? And then we'll jump to the second part of the question, which is any reason that all cases couldn't go to us instead of IA?
I think you hit a couple of the important points that I would have mentioned already. At one time, I think particularly before the protests of 2020, we had a little more room in our caseload to always take on certain categories of complaints like protest force investigations, but that hasn't been the case due to the number of complaints there. On IPR staff, the majority of our investigators have always come from a civilian background. We have some training and experience in different trauma-informed interview techniques. So if a complainant or a witness associated with a case is shorthand, we refer to as a vulnerable person, a person who has lived experience of living with a mental illness, or maybe houseless, or just may have some other factors in their life that make them vulnerable in society as we know it today. Generally speaking, we would assign those cases to an IPR investigator with the understanding that the interview and contact with that person, and hopefully we'll get better information out of it as well. Yeah, other than that, I don't necessarily want to get too far into the weeds. We could talk a little bit about intakes versus supervisory investigations versus precinct referrals, but I think that might cloud the issue a little bit too much. I don't know, Ross, what do you think?
I think that covers it. Maybe we'll take a shot at the second part of the question and just people can ask follow-up questions if they want.
I like it.
So I think for the second part, is there a reason that all cases couldn't go through IPR and then the new oversight agency later? So the big reason why that couldn't happen now is capacity and also the Department of Justice settlement agreement timelines. So all of our cases are on a very tight clock. We have different stages of investigations, and those are all very carefully tracked and measured and reported to the Department of Justice and also to the COCL team. And they are always, it's not unusual for us to like have a case that's a day late because we didn't get reports and to get emails about that from DOJ or something like that. So we have to, as managers, I think a big part of what Eric and I do and what Kelsey, who's not here tonight, but what the three of us have to do is to try to make sure that we are managing, our capacity as efficiently as possible. And so that means that sometimes if it's more efficient for a case to go to internal affairs, we'll send it to internal affairs if it doesn't have some of those concerns that Eric raised earlier. If we had endless resources and endless investigators, we would probably try to keep a lot more stuff, but we don't. And we have to get things done within a certain time, or the city can fall out of compliance with the settlement agreement. So that's something that's kind of always being looked at, and is something we report on quarterly and are always getting reports on and reviewing and things like that. So I don't know, Eric, anything you want to add to that?
No, the main thing is just to echo what you said about timelines. A lot of what we spend doing here does relate to trying to ensure that investigations progress in a timely manner, and there's just no wiggle room in those timelines. The clock starts the day that the person contacts us to make a complaint, and there are expectations about the steps that we take during every day and every week of the calendar after that.
And that includes, people wanting to look at, when did this person call you and when did you say that the clock started? I mean, it can get that granular. And that is something that I think that the new accountability system will also have. It'll also have that oversight from the Department of Justice, I would expect. And so it's an important thing to keep in mind. I mean, I think what was in the ballot measure would create a lot bigger budget for the new accountability system than we have. So you might have, that group might have the luxury of a lot more investigators than we have, and a lot more admin people and a lot more people to kind of do all the work, which would be great. I mean, that obviously, makes everything easier when you have more capacity. Any questions about that part?
There is a Commissioner Catherine. Thank you. That's a question.
I'm Catherine McDowell, a member of the commission. I just had a few questions. The first is, does IPR currently do any review any bureau generated complaints, or is it all community complaints?
We do, I would say more of the bureau generated complaints go to internal affairs, but if it's a captain or above in the police bureau, then it's pretty much automatically going to come to us. We tend to take the stuff that's a higher rank because although internal affairs is kind of sectioned off from the rest of the police bureau and they have their own captain who's supposed to report directly to the chief, so that the idea is that their chain of command is kind of separate so that they wouldn't be influenced by somebody high up that they might be investigating. There's also, the reality of that is that they all still work for the police bureau. And so if it's somebody high up in the chain, we tend to take those. There's just kind of our weird ones that pop up that we'll take. Sometimes people will make allegations about somebody who maybe didn't used to work in internal affairs and now does, or something like that. And so we'll make sure we take those ones. So it's a lot of kind of triaging when something comes in. A lot of times we'll get a call from internal affairs and we'll get the material sent over and they'll say, hey, please take a look at this. Is this something you guys can take, or do you think you should take it? Because they have to let us know about the cases that are coming in, and then we kind of have the first dibs. I feel like we can always take something off their stack if we want to, so which is important. But the other part of that is really that, as we said before, we have to keep an eye on efficiency, and that just because of the way the system is kind of set up, there, internal affairs does have better access to stuff. And I think part of all these things, the way that the system looks the way it does, is because originally IPR didn't do any investigations. I think it just kind of took the complaints in and sent them over, is my understanding. I know it's probably a lot more complicated than that, but over the years, I think IPR has evolved to have its own investigators, and then to be able to do its own investigations, and then to do full, administrative investigations, and then to be able to make recommended findings and stuff like that. So there just have been a lot of different steps, and that kind of has evolved into this weird kind of mirrored system.
Do you all ever do overlapping investigations of the same complaint?
Not really. We have to review all the internal affairs investigations, and they also have to review ours. And I think that's what the third question's about. So we have to kind of make sure that the investigation is fair and adequate, and they ask the right questions, and they didn't ask them in an inappropriate way. So there's times where you get complaints that kind of end up connecting to each other later, or sometimes you'll have somebody complain about, this happens in the Bureau sometimes, or you'll have somebody complain about somebody, and then later they'll complain about them, and it kind of goes back and forth, and you get into like retaliatory allegations. And so sometimes we'll have to say, well, okay, who's doing this one? Is this more appropriate for internal affairs? Is it more appropriate for us? You have to be pretty careful with some of those. They get really complicated. And then sometimes they also have to involve the Bureau of Human Resources, because some of the allegations might be something that don't violate, they might connect to a directive, a PPP directive, but they also might connect to city administrative rules. And so we have to bring them in, and they have to sit alongside on part of it.
So assuming that resources were not an issue, and you were, with the experience you have designing a system that says IPR does this and internal affairs does this, we've had some people suggest the dividing line should be all community complaints go to the Civilian Oversight Commission, the internal complaints continue to get reviewed by internal affairs. That's one dividing line, for example. Another is that everything goes to the Civilian Oversight Board in the first instance, but if it's concluded that it's maybe not as doesn't have as much community impact, it could go to be referred to IA. So I guess just kind of resources aside, where do you think, if you were going to draw a line between the two, with the idea that the Civilian Oversight Board does as much as it can, where do you think those lines should be drawn, or where would you recommend that we think about drawing that line?
I would say, I think that's a very difficult question to answer, because you never know with any given investigation where it's going to go. Things can really, you end up kind of going down rabbit holes at times. I think one thing I would say is that the civilian side needs to have first choice. And I think that they could have kind of the right of first refusal on potentially everything, and I mean, that is in some ways similar to what we have now. We just don't have the capacity, or the direct access, which affects our capacity. And I'd like to hear what Eric has to say about this too. But, I think you would absolutely start by prioritizing, the things that we try to prioritize now, which I think all those things that Eric listed before that can make for vulnerable people, and then I think that, there are some very strange types of cases where it's really beneficial to have internal affairs, because they just know the shape and structure of the police bureau very thoroughly. And there's a lot of really strange, the police bureau is a really, 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 really big organization. And so some of these cases, we call them B cases, because they initiate from inside the bureau, as opposed to C cases, which come from the community. Some of these B cases can just get really intricate. And we get cases where somebody will say, I didn't get promoted because this person doesn't like me and they've never liked me and we've worked together for 10 years. And this is retaliation from when we were both on patrol together back in 2005. And you have to go back and find all these records and all these things. I personally think that human resources should deal with all that stuff. I don't even think that kind of thing should really be looked at as police accountability if it doesn't involve, if this is a problem, if you worked at Target, and it's a problem if you work for the city, I don't think it belongs in the police accountability bucket. I think it belongs in the HR bucket. So if we're up to me, we would screen those kind of things out, where it's like, if you worked for any other part of the city, this would be the exact same type of complaint. It doesn't have anything to do with you being a police officer. It's got to do with you being a bad manager, or your employee doesn't like how you decline their vacation request or didn't promote them or something like that. I would screen all that stuff out and put that somewhere else entirely, so that you don't bog down the system, because no matter how much your budget is, you're still gonna, you'll use it. You'll end up filling it up. And so I would get that stuff out and focus on kind of having the right of first refusal, and then looking for, any kind of community complaint and any kind of vulnerable thing. I think that the way that our process is envisioned is a good way. It's just having the capacity to actually carry it out. But Eric, what do you think about that? You've seen a million cases.
Well, I agree with everything you said. Other than the civilian side having the right of first refusal, I'd also say that it would be really important that if we were talking some version of the current system where there's an in-house IA and then an out-of-house civilian accountability group, there also needs to continue to be communication and contact between those two groups. Because it's very important that both sides understand who has a case number open on what issue. And if you're not having that kind of contact or communication or information sharing, then you're going to wind up doing stuff like investigating the same issue twice, or stepping on each other's feet. So beyond right of first refusal, and knowing what the other side of the street is doing is very important. Other than that, I would say one thing that I've been consistently struck by, I've worked for IPR for almost 10 years now and talked to a lot of different community members, and people continue to surprise me with what they want to happen to a complaint. And so I'd be leery of a system where all community member complaints automatically go to the civilian agency, and all internal complaints automatically go to the Bureau's internal affairs group. I have found that oftentimes people, outside of any misconduct investigation or anything like that, they want to have an opportunity, say, to speak to somebody's direct supervisor, much like you would do if you're complaining at a store or a restaurant or something like that. And so any system that doesn't provide a community member with an opportunity to have some approximation of that experience, I think you're going to wind up spinning your wheels, doing cases on issues that might have been resolved better by having direct contact between the community member and that person's supervisor. Other than that, those are the two main issues I can think of.
And I think mediation I think it's underused in our current system, because the officer and the community member both have to agree to mediation. And there's not always, I don't think, enough incentive for everyone to agree. But a lot of times, I've sat in on some of those mediations. They can be the best for kind of low level misconduct. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what police do and why they do what they do. And sometimes law enforcement's, sometimes they're doing what I think the community wants them to do, but they just don't explain what they're doing very well. And so, especially when they're running from call to call, like they're doing these days, they kind of Batman in and do some stuff, and they Batman out. And a lot of times people are kind of left scratching their heads thinking, that guy looked like he was mentally ill. Why are they arresting him? But they're actually taking him to the hospital. I've seen that many, many, many times, both on ride-alongs and in complaints that we've investigated, where people are really upset that police are taking somebody to jail, but they're actually not taking them to jail. They're taking them to the hospital, but they just don't communicate that. And so, some of these things, you just need somebody to go in and communicate. And it's something that the Bureau, for all its resources, is not great at. They're not great at kind of communicating what happened a lot of times. And I think that results in a lot of misunderstandings. So we've had a lot of cases where people kind of get the explanation and they're like, oh, okay, well, that's actually And again, these are the lower level cases I'm talking about, where people are like, oh, actually, that's good. That's what I hoped was happening. I didn't realize that.
And I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Director, to interrupt you. I'm very sorry, but just of a matter of the time, I was gonna ask
Sorry.
if it's okay to move to the third question. But thank you very much for all your.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the third one, can you speak to what it means for IPR or IA to review each other's investigations? Is there any reason why the new system couldn't have a separate reviewing auditing function separate from IA/PPB? So reviewing an investigation means if Internal Affairs does an investigation, that will come over to one of the managers at IPR, and we will have to read the investigation report, the transcripts. You can read the transcripts, listen to the audio if you want to get tone of voice, read the police reports, watch the video if there is one. You have to review the whole investigation and make sure that you're okay with how it was conducted. If you feel like there's some questions that the investigator didn't ask, then you need to send it back. Or if you feel like there's an allegation that wasn't made. So say, you listen to the what the initial complaint was, and they say, well, I don't like that they, I feel like they racially profiled me. And then also I was, arrested and there wasn't probable cause for my arrest. And then you looked at the allegation, it only said, a false arrest or something like that. You would send that back and say, no, look, they're also talking about racial profiling. You need to have an allegation about that. And so you're kind of making sure that the investigation is fair, that it's complete, that it's adequate, and that it's unbiased. And it doesn't mean you have to agree with the recommendation that they're making, because the investigators do make a recommendation on whether or not a policy was violated. At that stage, you're just reviewing the investigation. You can always later say, I disagree with your conclusion, but I think you did the investigation. I think you completed the investigation. I think all the information is here, put on the table for a reviewer to look at. Eric, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I played less of a role in case review and more of a role in case production. So I'm not as familiar on a firsthand basis with all the elements of the review process. I will say, just in passing, time to time, it has been of a benefit to have a police bureau member review a particular investigation if there are elements of police procedure or kind of how you do a particular police related thing. If that is an element of the case, it is handy to have somebody who has kind of firsthand expertise of that review the case, and you can see if the report is accurate.
Yeah. For the second part of the question, is there any reason why the new system couldn't have a separate reviewing auditing function separate from IA/PPB? I don't see why it couldn't. I can't think of any reason why that would, anything that would necessarily prevent that. Yeah, I mean, the Internal Affairs also reviews our investigations. So all the things that I said about us reviewing their investigations, they do the same for ours. And so they want to make sure that, we talk to everybody that they think we should talk to and things like that. So, as it is right now, they're pretty much mirror images of each other. I don't know why you couldn't set up something that was different. One thing that we do that IA doesn't do is if we see a trend in complaints, but it's not, it's something that we see coming up a lot, we can do like a policy review of that, which is not a specific investigation to a certain case. It's just more of a review of, hey, we're getting a lot of complaints from people saying that, you're not providing equal service for people that don't speak English as their first language, for example. And maybe you're not using the language line that you have access to, or maybe there aren't enough officers in the Bureau that speak other languages beyond English or something like that. So if we don't feel like, we'll look at that a lot, see things that we think like, hey, this doesn't seem to violate a directive. So nobody's going to be found out of policy for this, but it does seem to be an issue that's coming up again and again. So we can try to get at that with a policy review. We used to have more people in our office. We used to be able to do more of those. We're trying to get some started again here, but once we get some working on getting some people hired, and we want to work on that again. But I think that kind of the auditing function and then those policy reviews, that's a really, really important part of this work. So I think it definitely needs to be built in. I really believe that, you're only going to administratively investigate people to kind of to be good to a certain point. You know, they'll get better at kind of following the rules. They'll get better at kind of knowing how they're going to get caught or something like that to some degree. But ultimately, you also need to say, you know, beyond, hey, you're going to get in trouble if you do this, this larger thing seems to be an issue, and this organization needs to think about how they do it. And maybe there's a way to do this differently that would kind of benefit everyone. And so I think it's kind of it's not exactly a carrot, but it's kind of a carrot and a stick, you know? So I think that's really, really important. And I would think that any oversight agency should definitely have that ability to look at things in kind of a more systematic way, as opposed to just individual allegations of misconduct. That's pretty limited. And there's a lot of things where you might think, hey, there's an issue here, but we just can't necessarily prove it, or we have to prove what someone was thinking. We have to prove that they did this. You know, like a racial profiling case, those are incredibly hard to prove, because you kind of have to prove that an officer did something because of, you know, based on someone's race, for example. And it's very hard to crawl inside someone's head and prove what they did, especially when we don't have body cameras, and you can't, I mean, we will hopefully soon, but you can't tell someone's tone of voice, you know, or how they talk to someone or something like that. Courtesy complaints can be challenging as well, because, you know, somebody can say, this officer was so rude and he was so short with me. And, you know, we can interview the officer and they say, no, I wasn't at all. But we don't have a recording. We don't have you know, we can't hear the tone of voice. And that's something we're really missing.
Thank you. I think we need to continue with the agenda. Unless it's thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Is there any additional question? Otherwise, I will pass it to public comment. Okay. We will now take public comment on the issues discussed in the briefing. We ask members of the public to keep their comments on the briefing or questions to the briefers to 2 minutes in length, and at most, and raise their hand in Zoom if you like to speak. Okay, I don't see anybody. Then I really want to thank, on behalf of the PAC, I want to thank you, Director. The staff, I think also, I forgot to ask the staff if they have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, there was one question that your response to the first question opened up that members of this subcommittee had talked about a while ago, and it relates to section 3.21.110. And it's just a clarification question of if it relates to part A3 here, about being notified in a timely manner by either the Assistant Chief of Investigations, Captain of IAD, or a member of the Police Commissioner's staff. Is there a definition that is a working definition of in a timely manner for that particular clause? And for example, there are some recent cases. How frequently does this happen?
You know, I don't think there's a definition of a timely manner. You know, what basically happens is, if somebody in the police bureau hears about something and it doesn't come in as a complaint to us, there will usually be, you know, a sergeant sees something or hears about something, they email up their chain of command, it'll get to like an assistant chief or somebody who will then send it to internal affairs. And so we usually get, when it gets to me, I get an email with a link to this whole long email chain, and then somebody in internal affairs saying, all right, let's assign this to an investigator, or, you know, we're talking to IPR to see if they want to take this instead of us. And, you know, that usually happens within a day or two. Sometimes it does take a while for things to work through the chain of command of the police bureau. They work weird hours and they work weird days. And so sometimes that does take a little bit, but, you know, it usually happens within a few days. If it's a big thing, generally you get a phone call right away. And if it's something that they want to see if we'll take, they'll send over the materials and call us pretty quick usually.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I will say thank you very much to both of you for being here. We really appreciate it. All the information was very valuable to the commissioners, and we're happy to have you here at the meeting Director Caldwell and Mr. Berry. Thank you very much, and hopefully you visit us soon. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And for the commissioners, we're gonna have a 5 minutes break. It's 8 p.m. We will come back at 8:05. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now move into discussions. First, by debriefing the December 10 work session. But before I pass it to the co-chairs, a quick reminder of our discussion guidelines. This is an open discussion, and we ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitator, and remember that the commission uses a weighted stack in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking into your comments. I will now pass it to the co-chairs. Thank you.
Hi, so this is Dan, and we have a lot of work ahead of us left over from the work session. So just briefly to say what the work session was like, we had 2 breakout rooms essentially, and 3 of us were in one of them and 2 were in another, and we ended up going through, basically splitting up. There's 6 areas we're supposed to be getting through. We did 2 areas in one room and 2 areas in another. And so what I want to do, and I'm hoping people don't mind if we don't have too much of a discussion about the work session. If you have anything that you really want to say about it, just weigh in. But what we would like to do is look at those 2 documents that came out of that to get us started for the next part of the discussion. So as part of the debrief, if you could show staff, you could show document 1 that's got parts 1 and 2, which is the intake and investigation. Maybe staff isn't ready to do that yet. Okay, so yeah, if you scroll up to the top, and you all got a copy of this, but just so that see that. So scroll down a little bit more. Go on to page 1. Sorry, I mean page 2. So so there you can see that we selected items that we thought were all in agreement, especially the parts that came directly from the research documents that the commission has voted on. Those got green. Green means good, we like it. And then scroll down again a little bit more, and then you see that there's some yellow stuff. The yellow stuff is stuff that we set aside for further discussion, and that's most of what we're going to do tonight. The dark green is just means we came across something that we'd already discussed in a different part of the document, so we didn't want to repeat it. And then the red is stuff that either the whole commission or we as the breakout groups said, no, we're not going to do this. Generally, that has to do with the decisions made by the full commission. And then if you can scroll down to about page, I don't know, 14 or so, you'll see we inserted all this language, that's good, from the IPR city codes, some of the stuff that we were just talking about, and some of it is similarly highlighted. And you can, if you scroll down some more, we also talked about the police review board code, the police association contract, and the DOJ agreement. So those are all other documents that we brought in during the work session, and then also some work sessions that we held in between then and now with just fewer than a quorum of us, so that we could just get through more of the document. And then if you go to document number 2, which is the findings and discipline sections, that's what the other work group went through, and you can see, we use the same coloration, but if you go down to, I think it's page 12 in this one, 12, no, a little further down, down, to the section about appeals. That's on page 12. Maybe it's on page 13. I don't know. There you go. So scroll up a little bit, please, to above where it says K1 on the left side. All right, so this is yeah, a little bit more. So this is the part where we're talking about the appeals process. And so the only parts that are highlighted here are the green, the parts that we agreed on in the research phase. So this has to be done still. It's going to take, my best guesstimate is it's going to take another 2 hours of work to go through this and highlight it. This section, and then the other one, if you scroll down another page, I guess 2 more pages to the last page, is the section on mediation. There it is. And so that, so those 2 sections haven't been dealt with really at all. But tonight, and again, forgive me if you're missing out on a discussion, feel free to raise your hand. But what we really want to do tonight is go through those yellow sections and have the discussion among the subcommittee members of how we can resolve them. Some of them are going to be easy. They're like yes, no questions. Hopefully they're easy. And some of them are going to be a little more complicated. But there are 21 sections, not just questions. I mean, there's like probably about 80 questions for this 21 sections. And we're hoping that no section is going to take us longer than 5 minutes to get through. We really want to try to get this meeting to end on time at 9 if we can. So some sections might take shorter, some sections might take a little longer, but generally we don't want to go longer than 5 minutes on any one of those sections. Anything you want to add, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley?
I can't think of any at this time except those one sections that are rather lengthy. Give it a minute or so wiggle room.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So
And,
is anybody?
Co-Chair, sorry to interrupt. I also want to remind everyone that's 21 and it's 8:12. We just need, I know we cannot push to go fast. We will take the time needed, but we only have 48 minutes to go to the 21 sections. It's around 2.5 minutes. But of course, if they require more time, of course, but I just want to, because a couple of people would like to finish at 9. Yes, Commissioner and Co-Chair Charlie?
So I had a commitment where I needed to be out of here at 9. I can stay a little bit longer, comes to find out, if need be, like 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know. I will pass it back to you, Co-Chair.
So with that information, are the other members of the subcommittee, or Commissioner Arya Bauer, Commissioner McDowell, Commissioner Iona, are you able to stay a little late as well? Yes. Okay, that would be great. Okay, let's go to it though. Then, my co-chair will take the first section. So if you look at let's pull up. Sorry, let's pull up the third document, which is the discussion points document. And yeah, as you see, it only covers these 4 first areas of agreement, and then there are things that we tucked into the future phases that aren't part of our subcommittee's work. So we put that in the later part of the document. We don't have to go over that tonight. And then suggestions for City Council, which we also have put much later in the document, which again we don't have to talk about tonight. But those are ideas that came up during our work session and our discussion of this concepts. So, is everybody ready to go through this?
Ready.
Commissioner, Co-Chair, I'm going to let you do the first intake section on advocates.
Okay. So on the first one there under intake advocates, which I clearly am all for. Civilians will have support persons, including attorneys. Officers can bring bargaining unit representatives and/or attorneys, and note guaranteed in the PPA contract 61.212, with the provision that waiting for those people to be available should not delay the investigation. And should officers also be able to bring another support person? An example is if the officer is a whistleblower and needs outside support. So then there's this related, should the Police Accountability Commission recommend the contract be modified so bargaining unit representatives come in later than the intake stage? So is there any comments in regards to this section?
Or more importantly, do people think that we should recommend that officers should be able to bring a support person other than a bargaining unit representative or an attorney?
I can ask yeah, Commissioner Debbie, please.
So does that mean then, I mean, so that would mean the officer could have 3 people there if you added the extra support person. How could we, I mean, if we were going to balance the scales, then how would we, because you're saying the civilian's allowed to bring a attorney if they want an attorney. And I suppose they could bring a friend or some other family member. So, could we say they could bring, I mean, if we want to make it even, could we say that they could bring 2 support people?
I don't think that's a question. The question about how many people a civilian should have isn't part of this question. I think the vision is that they can have people, including attorneys, and we're talking about making sure they have advocates, and then they might have a support person like you're talking about, so it would be basically even. I think the question is more, do we want to offer the opportunity for officers to have somebody that's not related to the bargaining unit as a support person when they're going through this process?
Well, I'd be okay with that, but you know, again, I was thinking of the balance, you know, but see what others think.
And that question aside, are you okay with this?
Yes. And I can ask a question, is there any opposition for what is writing here? If can I have, no, there is no opposition. Oh, we're not voting. Okay, sorry. And then I don't know, would you ask me how I
I
can?
think that's a good question. I think that's a good, if you want to ask that question once we have agreement from anybody, I think it's helpful to ask that question. Thank you, Facilitator Victoria. So, but I think Charlie said, the second question is what again?
Well, first, so I also want to ask a question. Is this addressed in some other section then, as far as being able to even this out, you know, like if the officers get 3 folks there, then so does.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The civilians are dealt with in our document. This is just asking about the officers. We will balance it out. So,
okay.
Commissioner McDowell has her hand up.
Yes, Commissioner Catherine.
Thank you. Actually, I think that we are adding a support person or advocate for the complainant to balance the scales, because I think officers, at least everything we've been hearing in terms of how they bring in the folks from the bargaining unit and or their attorneys, that's been a pretty dominant presence in these interviews. So I guess my thought is we should not, you know, allow even more. We should just stick with what's in the contract there, but then add an advocate for complainants who would find that supportive. So that'd be where I would end up. I would not try to change the contract to either add additional support folks for the officers, or to the related question below, which I'm just going to get to in the interest of time, to try to keep a bargaining unit representative from being with the officer at the intake stage. I would leave that alone.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. And I just want to let everybody know that we're already past 6 minutes. And if it's necessary, it's okay, but just want to share with you. Commissioner Debbie?
Just going to say, I'm happy to go along with Commissioner McDowell's recommendation.
Okay. Commissioner Christian?
I landed in a similar place as Commissioner McDowell on the when I first heard this question or this suggestion or whatever you want to call it. But I'm curious, is the thought behind this to make it so that everyone has the exact same number of people in the room? Like, is the thought behind this that there could be backlash from the like PPA or something like that if we don't add the ability for an officer to have another support person? Is that or is that not even like a question in this? Am I just interpreting that as an interpretation that's not real? Sorry, I can't talk, but I hope that makes sense.
All right. Well, so in the interest of time, I'm just going to repeat what was said by my co-chair at the beginning, which the idea is to consider a whistleblower officer who may not be getting support from the PPA or from the attorney, and therefore they might want to have a peer officer or even a civilian friend to come with them to be interviewed or through this process, because they might not be getting support from the police bureau. So that's the idea behind this. So, but I want to flag this to come back to it again because we need to move on to the next section. So I appreciate every time, but we're gonna work through it this way, and we're clearly gonna have to come back to these questions again, and maybe even bring them back to the whole commission. All right, so I'm gonna do the next section, which is timelines to file complaints. The timelines that we had listed in the document that came over from the research folks, I was on that subcommittee, was 18 months in New York and 1 year in San Diego. We were wondering if we want to choose one over the other, and then on top of that, should there be a different deadline for a more serious complaint than for a more minor one? So like if there's a complaint about use of force, can it come in much later than a complaint about, say, rudeness? So those are the two questions I want to try to address in the next minute and a half before we get to the other question in this section. Anybody have thoughts about having either 1 year or 18 months in order to file the complaint after the incident happens? Understanding that we talked about having extensions too for cause, but just like the basic timeline being either 1 year or 18 months.
Commissioner
So,
Christian, and then Commissioner Catherine.
Knowing that there's like Dan said, there's another, or like Commissioner Co-Chair Handelman said that there's another section down lower that has a question about extensions and whatnot, which is a whole other part of this. Just this question by itself, I don't have much of a preference. I would lean 1 year so that the complainant can have a little bit shorter of a timeline on when they get their feedback. But that could change with the next phases as we figure out how much staff we might have and how from that maybe a prediction of how long the investigations might take. But I lean the shorter one just because of the getting the resolution out to the complainant as quick as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine.
So just to follow up on the last comment, this is timelines to file. This is like a statute of limitations for the complainant, not the timeline to investigate. Just
thank you for that. Yeah, I didn't see that. Thank
clarity.
You.
So the question I had is whether there is a timeline currently under our system. I don't know that there is.
Well, yes, they tell people after a certain period of time they can't. They generally try to take lower level complaints in about 2 or 3 months at the maximum, and then use of force and other more serious complaints within a year right now.
Okay.
But that's not in the city code, but that's how the IPR functions.
I see. So I think it should be listed, and I guess I would, I think a year sounds like a fair amount of time. I think 18 months starts to get pretty long for the complaint to come in unless there's extenuating circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Christian?
Sorry, knowing that context, thank you for pointing that out. I did not see that at all. could we add a provision for extenuating circumstances? Because I feel like I agree that the year is fine, but if there is a situation that has an extenuating circumstance, it might be good to have that on there if it's possible. Just curious. Thank you.
All right. So, because of time, I tried to do was I tried to take the sections that had questions and separate them from the rest of the document so it'd be easier for us to read. But clearly, this was not a great idea because that's already written down. We already said there'll be an extension. So we don't have to worry about that. That's already in there. We already said there'd be an advocate and that the person can bring a lawyer and somebody else if they want. So I'll try to pre-answer these questions if I can as we go along. But I'd like to go back to the discussion question if you can, staff. Thank you. So, but my sense is what I heard from at least Commissioner McDowell was a year seems reasonable. I think I agree with that. Is anybody who strongly disagrees with having a deadline for a year? Okay, I don't see anybody strongly disagreeing with it. So let's flag that as 1 year and say we have an answer that we're going to write in the document. We can always change it later. All right. So the next question is there should be a limit on extending time if people are incarcerated involved in criminal or civil proceedings. It's hard to investigate something 10 years afterwards. So, there may be some reason a person can't file the complaint. There should be some outside time limit, because one of those extenuating circumstances that we talked about was if the person is in jail, for instance. Should there be an outside limit on that? And if so, do you have an idea what it should be? Spitballing here.
Commissioner Debbie?
First thing that popped into my head is like 3 to 5 years based on absolutely no information, just seeming that seems pretty generous, and 10 years is clearly, I mean, nobody will be working there probably who, from the time it happened. So, but again, there's no rationale behind that. It just seems like that might be a reasonable amount of time to extend.
Thank you. Commissioner Christian?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Iona. My immediate without any rationale thought was 5 to 7 years, so a little bit up there, but I had the 5 still in there. So 5 that as like a max or a somewhere in the number works for me. But again, no rationale. So that just is like what I think off the top of my head.
Thank you. Co-Chair Charlie?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, Dan, is there anything that you could bring to light around that particular statement there? Like, why can't they make complaints while they're incarcerated?
I think we're envisioning that they can, but it may be something where they fear retaliation. Their lawyer tells them not to do something, to poke at the police while they're in jail. There may be reasons that they don't want to do that.
Okay.
We envision allowing that to happen.
Can someone place the complaint for them on their behalf without keeping them anonymous, I guess?
I don't know.
Yeah,
okay. Probably not, but let's flag that for discussion and move on to the next section.
Okay.
But thank you.
Got it. All right.
The next one is yours.
Yeah.
File.
So who can file? Should there be an age limit for minors whose parents can file on their behalf? And at what age can a child file a complaint on their own? First one.
Commissioner Christian?
Just to clarify, the age limit for minors, is that going down, like before a certain age? I guess I'm trying to clarify which direction is the age limit, up or down?
No, I think the idea is that it would be what's the upper limit when parents can file on behalf of somebody versus when they are considered to be competent and able to file on their own.
Okay, cool. So these are asking the same thing in 2 different ways. These are the same question in 2 different phrased
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. I mean, 18, 17, 18, maybe around there, late teens. I'm not sure if 16 would be going too young. I'm trying to think of situations where a child might feel uncomfortable having their parent file for them and want to do it on their own. I feel like that's around that age, but also not everyone's different, so it's hard. So if someone else has another thought, feel free to throw it out there. I'm just spitballing.
Thank
Well,
you, Commissioner.
I see the staff's hand. I just want to
Yes.
point out that Commissioner Hussaini brought this question up because he said that his kids, who are relatively young, would be competent to file complaints on their own, in his opinion. Okay, I'll let you call the next person.
Yeah, thank you.
Facilitator Victoria.
Yeah, thank you. Staff, you wanna pass it to Commissioner Debbie, or you wanna say something before?
I can wait till after Commissioner Debbie.
Okay, Commissioner Debbie?
So would we be able to propose that, that the parents can, file for, on behalf of a minor up until the minor reaches the age of 18, and then they're really no longer a minor anymore. And then and then the second question, at what age can a child file a complaint on their own? I was sort of thinking like 14 might be, a good number, but maybe there's kids who are even younger than that who could do it on their own. But so those are my thoughts on that. The one thing I was wondering, do we need to have a qualifier in there? And maybe it's already someplace else, but what if you have a child who's developmentally disabled and just isn't capable, has a bad experience with police, but isn't capable of filling out the form and all of that. So, and the parent is happy to step in and help, but the kids, is no longer a kid, is a grown-up who's 22 or something. So what about that circumstance?
Okay, I will pass it to Commissioner Catherine, and then staff.
So I guess I would just want to say the only other issue that I've worked on where we focused on what is an age below 18 that a young person is capable or competent to do something, and that is in the healthcare area. And in the healthcare area, it's 15 and over. You can make your own decisions on your healthcare. So that may be, to me, it's analogous. We as a state have concluded that kids 15 and up can make their own healthcare decisions. So it seems like that might be, if we want to push it down below 18, which seems a little old, that might be an age we could target. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify. I think Commissioner Debbie made the point very well that those two numbers do not need to be the same, that it's perfectly fine to have an overlapping range of age in which, if the commission wants that, of course, in which the person can either file on their own behalf as a young person, or a parent or guardian can file on their behalf as well.
Thank you, staff.
All right, how much time do we have left in this section?
Nothing. We're already past 5 minutes.
Okay, so we're gonna have to come back to the anonymous complaints later. Okay, so ways to file. In New York, I think this is more of a research question. I'm not sure if we flagged this for future discussion, but this is really like a research question. So does anybody have time to research in New York how they use 311 to accept police misconduct complaints, and or does anybody know how 311 works here in Portland? And do you think that we can add police complaints to the 311 system? Commissioner Iona.
So we just had Mike Myers at a league meeting, and he mentioned that he talked about this 311 number. And my sense from what he said was it's like the police and other non-emergency calls. So if you have something where like he used the example of if you sprained an ankle and you need help, you don't necessarily need to call 911, you can call 311 and then they can send somebody, an ambulance to help you. You don't need the fire department too. So but I have no idea if it would work for filing complaints. All I'm saying is it's the police non-emergent, police and other emergency, non-emergency type things, lower level.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will pass it to the staff.
Yes, thank you. We'd be happy to get any questions over to 311 and maybe they could respond there. Their staff is very I mean their entire purpose is to respond to questions. It's a lot of what they do. So I'm sure they'd be very willing to, if the co-chairs or members were willing to maybe put some questions in, we could get those responded to by the next meeting. Thanks.
Right, well, I'm thinking that a question should be not whether they can take the complaints, but whether if somebody calls that line to complain, can they then direct them over to the agency? I see that Co-Chair Amici's got their hand up. I don't know, we're trying to keep this to the members of the subcommittee. Can you type your question in the chat, Co-Chair? So because I want to move on to the next question, which is, complainant should declare preferred method of communication at the beginning of the process. So we had a lot of discussion about what's written in the code says faxing or emailing or calling, and we should add other methods for, it's the 21st century. But the question is, when you first call in and you're talking with the staff, should you say, you know what, I really like it when people text me. That's how I want you to communicate with me. So just say, saying that up front to make it so that that's the way that people communicate with you. Does anybody have a strong objection to that being a suggestion that we put in our document? James' head's shaking. No, yeah, everybody's shaking their head no. Okay, good. Let's say that that's good. Oh, yeah, not everybody can see everybody. Okay, I have figured out how to flag the view so I can see everybody's head on while the document's up in a subcommittee. Okay, so the third thing here, and then we're going to run out of time on this item, is that this is a very long suggestion from Commissioner Renaud. I'm going to skip that for now. So the IPR code currently says that the board, meaning the community members, should work with the staff to make complaint forms available widely. That's not something we talked about in any of the research. Maybe have any problem with the idea of the community members helping get the complaint forms available in the public? Any opposition to carrying that forward for our new board? Or any ideas? Thoughts? And I'm going to turn it back over to my co-chair because we're out of time. Ian, any option? Does anybody, you still need time to think about that? I mean, just basically, if I was a member of the community oversight board and somebody said, can you help me put stuff out at your community centers or wherever you're going, I would say, yeah, I think that's a good idea for them to do that. Yeah, one head nodding. Okay, more heads. Okay, so we'll come back to these other two later. Co-chair Michelle Wesley providing information to complainants, please.
Okay, providing information to complainants. Discuss legal issue, complainants' access to records on their complaint, perhaps with confidential information redacted. Access to information for community members, not for board. Any questions, suggestions?
Commissioner Christian has a question.
Is the question if we have any strong opposition to that, or are we looking for ideas on how to do that? I guess I was confused on what was being asked of us on that one.
Right, because we kind of switched that up in the process here. So, Commissioner Dan, do you want to first ask, is there any strong objection or any questions or agreement or?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Then we object to the idea of asking the complainant if they
have access to records on their complaint, perhaps with confidential information redacted.
Right, so this is access to information for the community member, not the board. So access to information is covering what the board's doing. So we're asking, we're saying, what can the complainant have access to? So I think there's going to be limited, there's going to be things that the board won't be able to release to them.
And staff has raised their hand.
Yeah, so looking at the place that this came from, T5 over here, this is from the other document, that it's coming from the information that's being given to the complainant, as Co-Chair Dan said, and that's why it's in this subcommittee's conversation, and not in the other one on access to information, because that's about a different thing, which is what the oversight board gets. But you can see that there are parts in here which are that kind of help to frame the conversation by talking about potentially having confidential information redacted. This is the source of the particular text that we're looking at in the discussion points document. So the question would be if members think that complainants should have essentially as much access to records at the different stages of their investigation, the investigation into their complaint, I should say, with limitations being based off of potentially what needs to be redacted. Is that correct, co-chairs?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, we flagged it for discussion as a legal issue, so I don't even know if we can resolve it tonight. Why don't you read the next one, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley?
Okay. Should information be sent by postcard? Since that is not a secure means, right? People can read that postcard all the way along the mailing process.
And Commissioner Debbie?
It seems like you could send a postcard that says, we received your communication, and if you have any questions, here's where to call. That kind of thing, without anything confidential in the postcard. But on the other hand, then you might end up risking, that the clerk, whoever was putting together the postcard, might put too much in it. So I don't know if you could make sure that it was just like, we got what you sent us, stuff like that, then I think that could be sent by postcard, but anything with personal stuff in there should not be.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? I mean, I'm particularly looking at Commissioner Oriana Bauer, who wanted to have multiple means of communication, and if we want to carve one out, just wondering what you think about that.
Commissioner Christian?
Oh, weird. Sorry. I had like a request to unmute myself from whoever is hosting the meeting, and I've never had that before. Should information be put on postcard? I agree with Commissioner Iona. I feel like if there was a way to make sure that nothing sensitive got said in there, that it would be fine to send it by postcard, but that is maybe a dangerous game to play. I'm confused why where did the postcard suggestion come from? Could not everything just be sent in an envelope? What's the benefit of doing a postcard versus just like a stamped envelope that has the information inside of it, so it's hidden if it is sensitive? Or is that just language that was happened to be in there? Oh yeah, it just says possibly postcards.
Commissioner Christian, it actually came from a comment you made on the 5th.
Oh, I probably just said postcards, not thinking about it. I probably just said postcards, meaning like it's just the mail. So I'm sorry about that. Yeah. You can just when I say postcards, I probably just meant like an envelope in the mail. I recognize the postcard is its own thing. So sorry about that clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, can we move on to the next?
Yeah, I think we have to go on to the next section. What my PDF is stuck, so I'm gonna have to look at it on the screen. So we have to go on to the types of investigations the board will investigate. We'll come back to those other questions. This is very complicated, everybody.
Right?
I'm glad we're all interested in these. Types of investigations. Should the complainant be informed or this is the part I thought we were reading before. Informed or asked to consent to the complaint being forwarded to another jurisdiction for review. So like if you say, a Portland police officer beat me up during a protest, and they say, well, we found out it was a Tigard officer, so we're going to turn it over to Tigard, and you didn't want that to happen, you know, should you be required to give your consent for that to be turned over? To question.
Commissioner Christian?
My initial reaction to that would be in support. Yeah, I feel like that makes sense. But open to hearing if someone has any thoughts on possible reasons to not do that as well.
I think
I'm gonna I agree. I think it should be with consent, because I think one of the main issues that we're trying to solve here is the communication issue. And if once they get to the point where they find out it's from another jurisdiction, I think they should double back to the complainant and say, this is what's going on. Are you okay if we do this? Anybody have a strong objection to that? Asking consent? Okay, I can't see Commissioner Iona anymore. Okay, great. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Should complaints about tardiness and labor situations be handled only by internal affairs? This overlaps with the discussion we had with IPR before. So this kind of goes to this much broader question of whether internal affairs should exist or not. And I think Commissioner McDowell was saying, you know, we're leaning towards, my sense was, especially after hearing from Commissioner Hardesty, but she was at a different subcommittee, that I think that a lot of people on the Police Accountability Commission think that internal affairs should not handle complaints that have anything to do with community members. But then the flip side of that is what issues within the police should the board be able to look into? And you know, if an officer keeps showing up late, which is tardiness, now I'm confused because we're on the other document again. And labor issues, that's a very broad category, so I'm not sure what those are. So should our new board be able to look at those two things, tardiness and other labor issues, for example? Or we can kick it down the road for later.
Commissioner Christian?
Hi, sorry for speaking so much. I'm just trying to throw things out there so the conversation gets started. I think on this one, especially based off of the briefing we just had with IPR, it sounds like there's a big way that they think about capacity a lot. So I feel like that would be a good argument for not for having it be handled by internal affairs. But Commissioner Handelman, when we were having a work session, phrased this in a really good way that helped me to reframe how I was thinking about it, which was that the minute that something that internal affairs handles, that if a complaint that internal affairs is handling, the minute it affects a community member, then it would automatically go to the board. So if there's a provision we could write where that could be a situation, that might already be written as well. Sorry, I can't remember. There's so much in there. That would be my only addition to that if we end up sending it to internal affairs. Again, open to if someone else has a different opinion, just throwing it out there.
Thank you. Commissioner Catherine?
Yeah, my sense is that the oversight board should not be involved in these kind of HR issues. That should be internal affairs or the city HR, which I think was what we heard from IPR today.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you very
Okay. So I'm going to have to bail out of this one and head it over back to my co-chair because we already took up 5 minutes. So, we're going to have lots to double back to. So can you scroll down to the next section, please? So this is related to what we were just talking about.
Do you want to continue since?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Okay. All right. So the bureau complainants versus community complainants. The proposal, internal affairs, should still exist for minor protocol violations that do not impact the community. Taking home a police car for personal use, as an example. However, officers who file complaints against their officers should have the ability to ask the board to investigate to ensure an impartial review. Isn't that what APR just said? Anyway, should supervise, okay, go ahead. Would minor protocol mean those things that sound like they should go to HR? I guess is my question.
Yes.
I think so, and so this kind of goes back to the thing that Commissioner Oriana Bauer was just asking, whether we had this written down somewhere. We do. So this is what we're proposing, to write this into the document. We're going to finalize that to say internal affairs should still exist. Now that's, that was something we were trying to figure out. And it should exist for minor violations that don't impact the community. So, and when I can't remember who I was talking with anymore because it's been a long week. But if you take home a police car for your personal use and then run into somebody else's car, a community member's car with that, then that becomes a possible misconduct complaint that the board has to look at. But if it's just you took the car, you weren't supposed to do it, used it to pick up your kids or whatever, then that would be just an internal affairs. So this is a very important question. Do people agree with this idea that we should put forward this proposal that IA should continue to exist for these minor non-community things? See Commissioner Iona nodding her head. I can't see everybody. Can you show everybody on the screen?
And I will
Great.
pass it to the staff because they want to say something.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is a decision that fits into the 5th phase of work. So this, the particular text in question here about all of should internal affairs continue to investigate fits in here, but the question of should internal affairs continue to exist is something that's later down the line. So just wanted to clarify that this sort of distinction there between the decisions you may be asked to make over the course of this. And I know that's a little bit complicated. I just wanted to clarify what the commission has already agreed to in your agenda and scope document about assigning decision-making about what other parts of the system should continue to exist or not, sort of officially, and in that big picture direct sense. Is part of the 5th phase, which is called transition plan and broader system. However, I understand it's a little bit contradictory. I just wanted to clarify.
Commissioner Catherine?
I just don't understand that at all. How can we wait till the 5th stage to decide whether or not internal affairs should exist? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. How can we do what we're supposed to do in this phase, which is design the oversight system, without making that decision?
I agree. I think we're good. I think what our staff person was saying is that we can talk about this now, and then it'll pick it up again in the fifth phase.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
I don't think
that's correct. If I could just add one other thing, this is sort of the part where you decide if they have anything to do. So that is a very appropriate thing to talk about right now.
Okay, all right.
If there's any,
so I don't want to slow us down. I just got confused there. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So,
Oops. Move on to the next question.
yes, please.
All right, should supervisors' complaints about poor performance or work rule violations be investigated by the board?
And that's how the current system works. Those complaints I believe are handled by the Bureau themselves and not by IPR. But let's see what that code says.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Commissioner
Yeah, this is where
Christian? Or you haven't finished, Co-Chair Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's right. So this is, I'm going to paste in the part of the city code that identifies that one type of complaint that gets opened in the overall system. It doesn't say IPR does this. It says when Bureau Supervisors generate complaints about poor member performance, the manager is responsible for intake and investigation. So yes, it says that IPR does not do it. It seems like we already answered this question earlier. Do people agree with that? Yeah, okay, so we answered that question. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Preliminary investigation. Should we include the steps included in IPR code 321.120C for all cases? And so these are the steps that are listed there. Gather information through intake interview, assign a case number, make a case handling decision, send a letter to the complainant summarizing the complaint, and obviously that means send a letter, text, or whatever they choose, and identify the allegations. Those are the basic steps that are outlined right now in that code. We don't have those explicitly listed anywhere in our existing document. That seem reasonable?
Hmm.
Yes, okay. Nodding heads. Next. Anybody? Oh, Catherine, Commissioner McDowell, did you, I couldn't see your face. Those steps seem reasonable?
No, I was agreeing. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
And I want to remind everyone that it's A56.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. So we haven't even finished intake, folks. Okay. I think we should look at the dismissals thing really quickly and then start wrapping it up. We're not going to get to the rest of the document today. So I'm going to just look at dismissals. See IPR code 3.21.120C4. So that is on co-chair. Do you remember what page we found that on? Oh, it's on page 13.
Yeah, I was going to say 12.
Well, let's just go to page 13 of the document because I think things are highlighted in there. Page 13 of document 1. So it's 3.120. I don't know what happened with my Acrobat here. Oh, I think you were right there.
C4, all the yellow.
Right. So you can see that we put it all in yellow to discuss these specific reasons that IPR can dismiss things. So what I want to do, since we're very limited on time, is look at the two things that we flagged as things we do not agree, or that in the work session that would happen, that we do not agree cases should be dismissed for, and then we can come back to the other stuff later. So the two things that we have listed here is when there's clear and convincing evidence that the involved member did not engage in misconduct. And the reason we flagged that is because how can you have clear and convincing evidence with only an initial investigation? And I was actually going to ask that out of IPR, but we ran out of time with them too. Do you understand that point, that when they're just doing the intake investigation, and all they've got is the basic stuff that, was the officer on scene and stuff like that, but they haven't started doing interviews or witness interviews or anything like that, how can they know? So I see Commissioner Oriana Bauer nodding their head. Can we, Commissioner Iona's camera's off. Commissioner McDowell, is that a concern for you? They try to have clear and convincing evidence just at the intake stage in order to dismiss a case, or they might have enough evidence to know there's clear and convincing.
So I went through that with you.
That's right.
So I agree with the highlighting that you have there.
Okay. Okay, great. So let's say that that's agreed to, and then IPR was unable to identify the involved member, and so we flagged that because at the initial point of the investigation, they can't identify the member, but they can still do enough investigation to say that something happened, like what happened with the protest over and over again, and then later down the line they figure out who it is, and that person should have that attached to their personnel record, right? I've seen a thumbs up, nodding. I think Commissioner McDowell did this one with me too. My co-chair, is that something you agree with, that we shouldn't have them dismiss it just because they can't? Okay, so let's put that as something we agreed to. And well, we finished the intake questions. No, not really. We had to put a whole bunch of them aside too. All right, so clearly we're not going to be able to finish this, even this part today. We have our next meeting scheduled, I gather, either for the 5th or the 9th of January. We don't know yet. But that doesn't leave us a lot of time with the holidays coming up for people to work on this. Are there people? Can you put back on our Brady Bunch screen? Put down their document. Thank you. Yeah. Somebody got that reference. Yeah, so how many of the folks that are on this call would be able to work sometime next week or even in the first couple of days of January on plowing through some of these questions? I think we need, Commissioner McDowell, I think we should have at least 3 of us, because the reason a lot of these questions are flagged is us feel comfortable talking about it. And we really can't make decisions with just 3 of us, and that's why we otherwise have to be a public meeting. We have to have all of us there. All right, so Commissioner McDowell can help. Is there one other person that might be able to help in that time frame between now and, okay, my co-chair, and Commissioner Iona. Okay, great. Okay.
Dan, it
helpful.
looks like.
And Kristen.
Yeah,
Oh,
Kristen also raised his hand.
Oh, great. Okay, so that's everybody except for Commissioner Hussein, who's not here tonight. Great. Okay. So we'll work, for staff's purpose, we'll work through this as best as we can. The timeline that's written now is that we're supposed to have our full draft at the next meeting and then vote on it to send it to the commission. We've already alerted staff that that's not going to happen, and we've asked for an extra meeting. I don't know if that means we have to do another weekend meeting or what's going to happen, but the co-chair, Michelle Wesley, and I did say we definitely need at least one more meeting.
Yes, staff.
Yes, thank you. As you know, I think the members of the subcommittee and commission know we're up against a tight timeline here. And for the members of the public, on December 8th, the commission did request an extension. In the absence of hearing back on that yet, that's not likely to happen for a little bit. Council's not meeting right now, but in the absence of that, just trying to figure out when to schedule another meeting beyond the one tentatively scheduled for the 9th, and that's dependent on, in large part, the timeline of the other 2 subcommittees. If they all end up needing some more time too, then yes, the answer is there would be another subcommittee meeting. It would probably be on a weekend. If the answer is they're more likely to stick to their calendar, then we might be able to do it on a normal Monday or Thursday time slot. So that means 2 things. One, there will be time for another one beyond the 9th, and can definitely commit to that at this point. If folks are open to a potential weekend one, then, and looking at that as sort of the plan B to a Monday, Thursday time slot. The other thing is, I want to note that it's that's not said with any judgment or shaming or anything like that. This subcommittee does have the most complex of the 3 in terms of its mandate. And so it's been anticipated for a while by everybody, full commission, subcommittee staff, everybody, that this one, if anyone gets another time slot, it's likeliest to be this subcommittee. So please don't take that as in any way a negative to you and your work or the timeline there. Even as we simultaneously say, please, let's try to keep it moving as fast as possible at the same time. So, but yes, hopefully that clarifies that. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think I jumped ahead right into the next steps thing, facilitator Laura. So if you want to just move to the next thing after that, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we will have time for next steps, but now it is a public comment. And we will now take open public comment on the issues that PAC is discussing. All community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length and raise their hand in Zoom if you'd like to speak. Okay. I don't see anybody. Then we can go to the garden plot recap. This is time for facilitators, co-chairs, and the staff to summarize any items already brought up today which didn't fit into today's agenda. We'll recap those items here and use them in developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so these items can be addressed. And I will ask the co-chairs or staff if they have anything for the garden plot. Yeah, co-chair Dan?
Well, related to next steps and the fact that we didn't get through this tonight and the fact that we didn't even look at the full documents, I'm hoping that the folks on the subcommittee will take a look through the documents that exist and look at the things that are in green and yellow and red. And if you see something that you want to change or discuss, flag for discussion when we get back to the next meeting, please do that between now and then. So that we have, that we can take that document and start turning it into an outline of what's going to be what we present to the commission. So do people think that you could at least do that? Also, in addition to some work sessions between now and the new year. Co-chair Michelle Wesley, and then Commissioner Ariana Bauer. So co-chair first.
I absolutely will make myself available for work sessions, but also I apologize that sometimes questions come up even after I've looked at the form. So I just want to be able to put that out there.
No harm in that. No harm in
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
Ariana.
Yeah. Commissioner Christian?
When you say, I just want to clarify, when you say flag for discussion or for questions or whatever, do you mean just mentally or on our own notes, or do you mean in track changes?
Wow, deep question there. Yeah, see, I don't want to have too many different versions of this floating around. So would you be okay to type it, identify which section you're looking at and then type it into an email to me and the co-chair and staff, if you would like?
Sure, that's fine. I was just curious to figure out what the best method would be.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Having too many track changes is going to make this even more complicated than it already is. Thank you. Sorry about that, Facilitator Laura. Just we went to next steps and garden plot. So that's all I have for the garden plot. Really, is for us to keep working on this document.
Thank you. And okay, staff, no. Okay. Now I'm gonna reminder everyone that you can now submit advanced public comments to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or postal mail. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you to the interpreters supporting access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and its subcommittees for all Portlanders. Thank you to our briefers for coming and spending your time sharing your thoughts and with the commission and the public. Finally, thank you to all the members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions, and for every commissioner that's please submit advanced public comment prior to future meetings. If you are not already signed up for email updates, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. The next meeting of this committee will be early January. It's now 9:08 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much and good night.